Hey guys, I know it's late, but it's time for Theology Thursday, and I'm chilling in my dining room and in my bathrobe. So I didn't actually remember that my bathrobe was on until I started getting the camera ready. But that's okay. Hey, theology can be one of those things that we do in our bathrobe. That's totally fine. I do want to give a shout out. I feel like citing your sources is important. So most of the material that I bring to you on Theology Thursday, I obviously have to brush up on. I'm not just like an encyclopedia for this stuff. I like to use Millard Erickson's Christian Theology. Used this when I was studying in seminary, and this was one of the required texts. And let me tell you, this is one of the best theology books I've ever purchased. So very exciting stuff. So if you're interested in starting to study theology on your own, boom, once again, look for the one that's not backwards. Christian theology, Millard Erickson. Millard, I can do it. Millard J. Erickson. All right, anyway, so good stuff. So today we're going to talk about the hypostatic union. The hypostatic union. Isn't that a long and lengthy sort of subject line? All right, so the hypostatic union, what is it? Well, it's the idea that Jesus was fully God and fully man. So the hypostatic union is one of the mysteries of our faith that is kind of up there with the Trinity, right? Like we can't quite wrap our minds around it. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is because it's hard to be 100% of something and also 100% of something else. So especially when those two are opposites. And that's the second one. Like, how did those two natures coincide when they're so very, very different from each other? So the hypostatic union is never going to quite make 100% sense to us. It's always going to be something that we struggle with. It's always going to be something that we question and have a hard time with. And honestly, it wasn't until 451 AD that the church really nailed down at the Council of Chalcedon, maybe? I'm not sure. It's Theology Thursday, not Church History Thursday, so get off my back. But it wasn't until the mid-5th century that the church really nailed down this idea in an official position. So it is something to struggle with, and that's okay. As long as you remain orthodox, as long as you avoid heresy, this is one of those things that it's okay for you to have questions about. Like the Trinity. The Trinity is super difficult to understand too. We can never fully wrap our minds around it. And it's really awesome that that's how God is. All right, so why is this important? Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, like I said, it's a foundational Christian doctrine, so that makes it important. Another one is this. So if Jesus was not fully human and he was only fully God, then he didn't do anything to really connect God with humanity, right? There still would be a gap there between God and humans. So it's important that he was human, because one of the fundamental concepts here of redemption and reconciliation of humans to God is that God took on the form of humanity. So if he was not fully human, then that reconciliation never took place. At the same time, if he wasn't fully God, then no infinite consequences of anything Jesus did could possibly exist, right? Like no man can do things with infinite consequences, meaning that the crucifixion couldn't cure sin infinitely, couldn't free mankind infinitely, couldn't allow for salvation infinitely. So this becomes a really important doctrine. And there's been like a million different ways to look at it. Really not a million, but like there were several big heresies that kind of came up when people were talking about this subject and trying to figure out exactly where they landed on it. And now we look back at them as heretical, but at the time, people were struggling and they wanted to find an explanation here. So I'm not going to go through each of those. I don't find that that's a real worthwhile discussion, but there are some things, again, Millard Erickson brings these up. There are some things that we should definitely consider, things to keep in mind when we're talking about this. So first, the hypostatic union, right? This combination of human and deistic characteristics, or whatever, 100%, is not Jesus emptying. It's not a subtraction of deity. It's an addition of humanity, right? So people like to say from Philippians 2, 6, and 7 that Jesus emptied himself. But if you take a closer look, it says he took on the form of a servant, which means that the second person of the Trinity took on this form of a servant, of a human, of a lowly thing. And that's a much easier way to look at the concept of it. Instead of saying that Jesus was somehow less God, because suddenly if you make Jesus less God than he was, before he was conceived, then you have the Trinity. The whole Trinity's out of whack. So instead of thinking about him taking away his deity, think about him adding in humanity. Another one, the two natures work together, right? So his humanity and his divinity work together. Which means that Jesus greatly limited himself. So the example that Erickson gives is, like, think about a runner who he's running a race, and one of the legs of the race, he has to be tied to another person. And even if that person is extremely fast, they're still going to go much slower than if they were running alone. So this is a lot like Jesus, right? The second person of the Trinity having his nature, and then adding a human nature sort of limited him. It didn't take away from his deity, but it limited him. We have to think of it that way, that, Jesus, he got tired, he got hungry. Those were things that the second person of the Trinity never had to do. The Son never went through those things until he was Jesus of Nazareth, right? All right, here's another one. So Jesus is the perfect revelation of God. He shows us exactly who God is because he was fully God. So we see who God is through Jesus. At the same time, Jesus also reveals to us what it's like to be fully human. So you and I are not full humans. By our DNA and by our classification, we're human beings, but we are not as God intended us to be. The fall ruined that. So Jesus actually had the spiritual nature that was intended for humans, and that we will have in the future after the resurrection, right? And after we're glorified with Christ. So when that happens, we'll have the same nature, spiritual nature that Christ had, but until then we won't. But not only was he fully God and fully human, he was more human than you and I are. Think about that. He was more human than you are, and he was more human than I am. All right, and then finally, I think I kind of hinted at this already, but the second person of the Trinity, he existed long before Jesus of Nazareth was ever conceived, right? So it was not that a man ascended to godhood. It was that God added on the image of man to himself. So, we can't think that like Jesus was born and then God decided to make him God. No. It was very much that the Son, the second person, was God, and then he came down to the earth to be this servant, to take on this image of the servant. So anyway, that's a quick survey of the hypostatic union. Man, it is a complicated thing, and like I said, we're never going to fully have it down. But it's something that we struggle with, it's something that we think about, and it's fun to think about because it's Jesus. And we get to better understand and better appreciate his nature, who he was, who he is, and how we can connect with him. So we love you guys very much. I hope that these videos are doing you some good. I know Theology Thursday is kind of funky because it's really heady stuff, and I try not to be that way in my teaching, but this is cool. It's cool to talk about. So thanks for sharing this time with me, guys. I love you. I'm going to go to bed because I'm wearing my bathrobe, and that makes me think it's time for bed. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.